Hi there. My name is Evelyn, and I am the mum behind Finding Charlie's Voice. Charlie's mum, wife to Will, and we have an older daughter, Sophie, who is 9. And I just realised that since we set up the page in May, that I've never come on to do a post or a video about Charlie or about us or about why we started this journey. There are two reasons. One, I don't particularly like being in front of the camera like this, but I am going to get better at it. And because I actually love watching this and other people's stories. And secondly, I got personal info here. I got uveitis, or an infection in the uvea, or an inflammation in the uvea in my eye in January. And I've been on some form or other of steroids and now on oral steroids since January. So it has meant that I have been really, really grumpy. Will has been loving this new me. Also put on a huge amount of weight because of it. So I've been feeling pretty crappy and didn't particularly want to show this version of myself, which is ridiculous. But anyway, here we are, warts and all. And I said I'd come on and tell you a little bit story about Charlie and why we set up this page. So I guess May was the reason why we decided to set it up, because it was the Apraxia Awareness Month. And Charlie has a condition called a verbal dyspraxia. So it's a severe speech sound disorder. For reasons that are largely unknown, the pathways between the brain and the mouth basically haven't connected the same way as yours and mine. And so while inside he thinks he's speaking, by the time that message gets from the brain to the lips and the palate and the tongue and all those muscles that are necessary to produce speech, what comes out is often unintelligible. So luckily for us, Charlie doesn't have any difficulties with his receptive language, so his ability to understand language or to understand instructions, which then makes it incredibly frustrating for him because he thinks he's speaking, he can understand everything, but he just cannot get the message out. And so we started this journey when Charlie was about a year and a half. So we knew that there was something not right with his speech. He wasn't following the same patterns of development like his older sister was. So we were lucky, I guess, to have somebody to compare him to, even though you'd hope to never compare your children. And we asked for Charlie's speech to be assessed by the HSE, which is the NHS equivalent in Ireland. So it's the health system here in Ireland. And we waited a year for that assessment to take place. So he was 2.5, and they told us that he had a severe expressive language delay, that he would absolutely need intervention, and that he would need speech services. So we waited a year to be told something that we already knew, and then to add insult to injury, we were stuck on a waiting list. And we were date weighted from the date of the assessment that took place, not from the date that we were actually referred, which drives me absolutely insane when it comes to the way that the HSE operates things. That's another story altogether. So he's 2.5, told us yes, he needs help, stuck on a waiting list. In the meantime, we decided to go privately, and after a failed start with one speech and language therapist who Charlie just didn't like. He was quite young actually at the time. It was actually before he was 2 that we started going to this particular lady. He was still in nappies, and he used to walk into, or we'd go into the person, and Charlie would do a poo straight away. Didn't matter what time of the day it was, didn't matter if I changed appointments, didn't matter. He just didn't like this person, and the person kept saying to me, don't pick him up unless he says up. Just don't do it. Just stand there and go up, up, and don't pick him up until he says up. Of course, Charlie couldn't say up and was never going to be able to say up, and no amount of waiting for him or telling him to say up was going to make him say up. So we left that speech and language therapist, and you know, this is what happens. You have to find somebody that works well for you, for your child, that understands and sees actually the challenges that your child has. And we found another speech and language therapist in Coinch and Naas, Catherine Sheehan, and literally within a couple of weeks of seeing him, like very, very early on, she said this is a child who's typically dyspraxic in terms of his speech, and that, you know, it was the first time that we had heard that Charlie could have verbal dyspraxia, as we call it in Ireland. In England, it's called apraxia of speech in the UK, or in the States. So the word interchanges, it's the same thing. So I went home, Googled it, and went, crikey, this is a lifelong neurological speech sound disorder. This is not something that's going to go away. This is not something that's going to require, you know, a block of 6 sessions of speech and language and Bob's your Uncle Charlie's going to speak again. This is a really, really complex severe and rare speech disorder. So worldwide, we know that there's about 1 to 2 in 1,000 children worldwide that have this condition. No idea, of course, how many people have it in Ireland, because there's never been any research done on it. There's never been any numbers published on it, and that's what makes it really difficult. So in all the Googling that we were doing about this condition, trying to find out, as any parent would when they hear a word or a diagnosis about their child, we couldn't find anything relative to the Irish market. Of course, we could find everything to do with the US, who have a bankload of information on it, Australia, Canada, some information in the UK, but nothing for Ireland that was relevant to our health system and the way that things operate here. And that was incredibly frustrating. And so I reached out to the Irish Association for Speech and Language Therapists to ask, what's your position on this? How do we treat it? How do you recognise it? How do you diagnose it? What's the gold standard? They didn't have a position paper on it. Contacted the HSE. Hi, I've got a kid who's got verbal dyspraxia. What are the pathways? I got a generic responses about delayed speech, about blocks of 6 sessions, about this, that and the other. So no information there. Reached out to the Department of Education in terms of educational supports. No, got nothing back. In fact, got a lesson on dyslexia and dyspraxia, neither of which my child has. Contacted the Minister for Disability, met him, promised that we were going to be helped, weren't. Reached out to the Department of Health, got nowhere. And so it's been a vicious circle and a massive fight really since Charlie has been born, and the only help that we've received is privately, funded through ourselves, of course. So that has been at immense expense to us personally as a family. We've been lucky enough to be able to do it. Not every family can. And I guess we realised during this journey that we weren't alone. That our particular practice, so the practice that we go to for private speech and language therapist, Cainteann Naas, that the person that we were seeing, Catherine Sheehan, who's a clinical director there, she had significant experience in apraxia of speech. So she worked with Dr. Tricia McCabe, who's the leading worldwide expert on apraxia, when she was in Australia. And so we were lucky, and she was telling us that she had a number of children actually in her practice that had verbal dyspraxia. And so I set up a support page on Facebook. It's a private support page called Verbal Dyspraxia Are Missing Voices. And so that is a group of parents and trying to get connection. So I advertised it on various websites, say, look, if any children have this condition, can you join our group and can we talk? Because we were all in the same boat, navigating this journey for which there was no roadmap, no solution, and we were all in the same boat. And hearing the stories of other parents, heartbreaking, to say the least. God, I'm going to get upset now. We were all in the same boat. None of us were getting the help that was recommended. None of us were getting early intervention. None of us were getting intervention in the way that our children needed it. And we've been fighting this, I guess, for so long and getting absolutely nowhere. It seems that the more help your child needs, the less help that they get. The rarer your condition is, the less information that's there. And what's really frustrating is that this information is available. It is available everywhere else in the world. So it's not like that we have to start from scratch in Ireland and that we've, discovered this new condition that nobody else knows about. And, you could give somebody a bit of a break if that was the case. But this condition exists, and it has existed for a long time. The documentation is there. The evidence-based treatment is available. And all we need is somebody to recognise that this is a condition that needs a particular type of intervention, and it needs intervention early on. And so, despite Charlie being referred when he was a year and a half, the first bank of speech and language that Charlie got from the HSE, so this is, to clarify, therapist to child intervention. So not the intervention that they've sent me on, these parent programs that you don't want to go on and that are not very helpful and that they don't target the speech issues that your child have. But nonetheless, they make you go on them, because if you don't, then they don't put you on a waiting list, and they don't tell you that either. So the first intervention that Charlie got was last October. He was 5.5, so we waited 4.5 years. Sorry, it was 5 years, 10 months. We waited 4 years, 6 months, 4.5 years for Charlie to get intervention. The intervention was 6 sessions. So we did 6 weeks of therapy, 6 one-hour sessions. They implemented an AAC device, so it's like a computer that you can tap out, and it helps to generate speech. It doesn't work on the movement challenges that Charlie has to produce speech, But they figured that this was the only thing that they could do in the short time that we were being assigned. After the 6 weeks were up, we were told we'll see you in a couple of months. But then Charlie's going to be transferred to a different team, and that the wait in that team is between 24 and 26 months. COVID kicked in, our follow-up didn't happen. That's fine. Don't have an issue with that. But I have no doubt that those waiting lists are now going to push on. So I'm not expecting that Charlie's going to be seen till, like, he's going to be 7 in December. He's not going to be seen till he's probably 9. So from the age of 1.5 to 9, Charlie will have received 6 speech and language therapy sessions for a child that has a lifelong neurological speech sound disorder. And what annoys me is that, apraxia can sometimes be compared to aphasia. And aphasia happens when those who may have a stroke lose their ability to speak. And they get intervention. They get intervention in hospitals. Maybe not, if there are people here who've had parents who've gone through that, or young people who've had a stroke or a brain injury. I don't know what the waiting lists are like actually for speech, so I'm speaking off the cuff here. But I can imagine that nobody with aphasia is waiting 9 years or gets 6 speech and language sessions over a 9-year period. So why do we do it to children? Why, for children who haven't acquired those ability to speak, why are they not seen early? Why are we not nipping it in the bud early? Why are they not supported? And we set up this page to try and raise awareness because nobody knew about verbal dyspraxia. And in fact, loads of speech and language therapists don't know about it. And that's another story again. They're not supported. Speech and language therapists have to become generalists. They have to know everything. And they're not supported then in these rare conditions. So a lot of the parents that I'm in touch with, their speech and language therapists are saying, yeah, it kind of looks like apraxia, but I'm not really sure. And this is where the trick is. It's really, really difficult to diagnose it. And you can only diagnose it actively in therapy, and it only can be diagnosed when all other speech disorders are ruled out. So it is complex. And many speech and language therapists just simply don't have the experience in it, or they will go through their lifetime having never met a child with verbal dyspraxia. And so I don't know what the answer is. It's heartbreaking to think that a basic human right like speech is not supported, and it's not given that attention that it deserves. And I guess I woke up this morning and looking at the new cabinet and thinking about all of the emails, representations, meetings and advocacy that we have done, myself and my husband, over the last, and every other parent I guess, over the last couple of years, with the Minister for Health, Minister Harris, with the Minister for Disability, Minister McGrath, with the Minister for Education, Minister McHugh, with the Minister for Children, Minister Sapone, with the Taoiseach himself, Leo Varadkar. And we're back to square one. We're back to dealing with new ministers who will no doubt ask us to outline what the problem is once again, who will request information once again, who will blame the previous government for not doing the job that we asked them to do, which is to simply help our son find his voice and every other child like Charlie. So today I am feeling really pissed off and annoyed and upset. And so we're hoping that with your help that you will share our story, that verbal dyspraxia will be given the attention that it deserves, and that you agree with us when we say that every child deserves a voice and that children deserve to be seen, but they also deserve to be heard. And so we need you, I guess, the voters, the followers, to speak about verbal dyspraxia, to speak up for those that can't, to support us when we need your support, whether that's in future fundraising campaigns to help other parents who may not be able to afford speech and language, or schools that need devices to help children speak. They're not being supported. I mean, in an ideal world, what you want is for children like Charlie to be given that support in an educational system. So in school, that speech and language therapists are available in school to support them. And yes, I know you might say that there are language units, but they're limited. Children can only access those language units for 2 years. They cannot access them if they have another diagnosis. So if you throw in a dual diagnosis of autism, for instance, for a child that might be in a mainstream school and perfectly doing fine, they can't go to them. If you've got a child who has verbal dyspraxia, it's a motoric speech issue, so it's to do about the motor planning of speech. Speech and language units may not work on that because they're working on language, delayed language, and not on speech production, which is what Charlie has. So effectively, he doesn't fit anywhere. He just sits in a classroom, 23 other kids, a lot to say, no way to say it. So this is now 15 minutes long. I really hope that I've managed to keep you listening to the end. Apologies for the wobbles in between. And yeah, now that I've done this, maybe I'll come back on again. But thank you for joining and continue to share our story. And we really hope that we can bring you along on our journey. And maybe next time I'll bring Charlie on and you can see what it's like for a child like Charlie who has got verbal dyspraxia and what that may sound like. Thank you so much for listening and thank you for following. Will and I and Sophie and Charlie are so grateful, and I'm sure every other parent out there who's a child with a speech disorder, you're listening now and you are hearing what verbal dyspraxia is. It's one more person. So thank you so much.